like right now, we're operating under the National School Lunch Program.
The donut.
We would move to operating under the
But I was the only one that
Community
did it.
Eligibility
Really?
Provision Program.
Because after a few donuts, they were out.
So we're not.
Started eating other stuff.
It's a nice variation of a different college tradition.
I would die from a gut ache.
All right, it is 6 o'clock, so we will call this
Woo.
we'll call this feedback. Call this Budget and Finance Committee meeting of the Shippensburg Area School District School Board to order. We just wanted to note attendance-wise that we're almost all here. We've got a couple missing members, but they are likely to be here soon. They just are coming in hot, as Mr. August was saying, with other commitments. All right, so we have a couple items on the agenda, but really I think that this is Ms. Lent's presentation, so I will turn the time over to her.
All right, good evening. So the two main topics on tonight's agenda is to talk about a program under like the Food Service Department. It's called the Community Eligibility Provision Program, as well as to give you an update on our 23-24 budget, and hopefully we can come up with a final budget that can be placed on the upcoming June 12th agenda to receive final budget approval, so then we can move out and get our tax bills placed in the mail. So starting with the Community Eligibility Provision Program, prior to arriving to the district, I know the business administrator at the time, and I think Dr. Stevens, had evaluated the district's viability in participating in this program. And at that point, if we would have enrolled in this program, we would have lost money. However, I've been watching the numbers increase in terms of our free and reduced students, and I was hoping that maybe we could apply for it this year, but upon reevaluation, I don't believe we are still fiscally viable. However, I wanted to share with you the information, so if at any point in the future we believe that this would be a viable option, the administration would bring this recommendation to the board for approval. I will get into more details later, a little bit about what the community eligibility provision is, but before I do, I wanted to provide the board with an update on our free and reduced enrollment numbers of our students in our food service program. And the reason why I wanted to review this before I got into the community eligibility provision program, because it's somewhat based on this data. It's a subset of this data that you're seeing here this evening. So one reason for providing this is I wanted to show the growth since I've been here in the district, how our free and reduced numbers have grown. Also, just as we've talked about in the past, how our free and reduced percentage seems to drop off at our secondary level. Mainly now it's the high school. And again, this information that you see here, some of it is used to determine our eligibility into the community, community eligibility provision program. So the top chart that you see this evening was as of August 31st of 2015. So I started in the district in 2015. And so we're going to look at the percentages column. That's what we're going to focus on. So up top, you can see what our free and reduced percentages were by building as of 2015. And then the bottom chart, looking at the percentage column, is based on May of 2023. So just to go down over them, you can see James Byrd was 53%, is now up to 58.3. Nancy Grayson, when I started, was at 46.8%. Our free and reduced percentage is now 55.5%. G Blues was at 11.6. It's now up to 26.4. The intermediate school was 44.7%, now up to 55.4%. The middle school was at 42%, now up to 54%. The senior high school was 34%, up to 46%. And so our district-wide went from 41.5% to 52%. So in the past, you can see if you just look at like the middle school and James Byrd as a comparison, in 2015, the middle school was at 42% and James Byrd was at 53%. So you can see there was 11% swing back in 2015, but that swing is not as great anymore. If you look at the current school year, Jamesburg is at 58.3%, and our middle school is at 54.3%, so only a 4% swing. However, our high school still seems to be dropping off significantly when you compare them to the highest elementary schools. So the swing in 2015 was about 19%, and as of the current school year, still like a 12% swing.
So, board, just remember these are the folks who are able to complete the paperwork. So there may be some variations from 2015 where people did not complete the paperwork, and we're just getting to more people who would qualify. And that's always something to remember, is that 52% is probably a floor rather than a ceiling. And there's probably some percentage of folks that just haven't been able to complete the paperwork or don't want to complete the paperwork.
And so there's different ways to qualify for free and reduced. For folks that apply through the state for certain benefits, whether it's SNAP or TANF, we get that information directly from the state, which is called direct certification. So we just get the names from the state saying these people qualify for free lunch. However, there is still a population that is submitting the traditional paper application, or you can submit it one of two ways. You can submit the paper application through hard copy, or you can complete it online. But that's not considered a direct certification. A direct certification is considered when a family goes and applies at the state level for a different state benefit, then they automatically qualify for free, and we get those names from the state. So of the 52% you see there, approximately 83% of those are direct certifications from the state, and about 16% of those are the traditional paper applications that you see come home in the mail, and they can either do that, again, by hard copy paper or can complete that online. So what does that mean for the community eligibility provision program? So what this is, it was a provision in the Healthy Hunger Kids Free Act in 2010, which allows schools who have high poverty rates, if they meet certain qualifications and if it's fiscally appropriate for the district, to provide free breakfast and free lunch to all students in the building that has qualified for the CEP program. And so what does this do? It eliminates the burden of collecting household applications for the district and processing those. So let me back up before I go on any further. So when looking at who can qualify, or how we determine the qualifications for the CEP program, if you recall, I said there was different ways to qualify for free and reduced, and one of those was through direct certification. The CEP program only looks at direct certification. It doesn't take into account those folks who applied through the hard copy application. So when looking at this program, we can look at this in a multiple of different options. You can look at it by building. So they call it a site or by building. If the CEP calculates out to be financially viable, which they call it as the ISP, the individual student percentage. So if that is high enough to be fiscally viable, we could apply for just one building. We could group buildings together, or we could group all buildings together and apply district-wide. So some of the benefits, if we were able to join the Community Eligibility Provision Program, again, like I said, all students in the enrolled site or building would receive free breakfast and free lunch. It has a tendency to increase breakfast and lunch participations in those buildings that we could offer the CEP to. It would improve access to the nutritional meals for disadvantaged students whose families may not have applied for this benefit. It simplifies the meal counting and claiming process for the district. It would eliminate identifying students. Even though we do a good job at trying not to identify, there are still ways I think students can kind of tell if other students are receiving this benefit. It would reduce paperwork at the district level, and it would certainly, if district-wide, could eliminate the student debt from those that haven't paid from reduced lunches or paid lunches. Some considerations, if we were to apply for this program, we would no longer be collecting the student eligibility. So there could be some drawbacks to that as we use this information for other programs in our district. If the ISP percent is less than 62.5%, which would not generate 100% free claiming, that's where that financial consideration comes into play. If it's financially viable for the district to move to this program, if our ISP is less than 6.25%. And of course, it would increase participation in our breakfast and lunch programs. Some drawbacks we would need to consider is our Title I funds are distributed through free and reduced lunch percentages. So this may cause a redistribution of those funds from past. So it could potentially change which building would be our highest Title I building. So we would have to make plans and know if that could possibly shift our most financially, looking at, what do you call it?
Our,
Mrs. Woodall?
I mean, I call it the highest low SES building, so I don't know if that's really the right term or not.
Disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged buildings, it could change that rating. And then it could also determine how, it could have an impact of how we determine our E-rate, and of course, the district participates in the E-rate program annually. So this would be things that we would need to figure out if we were able to move forward in this program in the future. And in our PIMS reporting, they have to report the free and reduced lunch eligibility information. So we would no longer be collecting that, and we would have to move to using poverty data. So that would be just a change for our PIMS staff to make sure that they are reporting that information correctly.
Just to reiterate, that free and reduced socioeconomic number is used in a variety of different ways for a variety of different programs. And so the method of collecting it the way we are is kind of the cleanest and clearest. This would shift that into a bit of an unknown situation.
And then I think I had mentioned some of the drawbacks is we do use the free and reduced meal applications for different things across the district, whether we waive fees, reduce fees. And if our percentage is not high enough and you're calculating a revenue loss and the board would still want to move forward with this program, we would need to subsidize that revenue loss in the food service fund by either hoping to make it up through sales of a la carte or through non-federal funds, which means the general fund would have to subsidize the food service fund if there would be a loss. So this comes directly from the state. The state calculates our ISP, our identified student percent. And so you can see there that of all of our buildings, this provision says to be eligible, you need to be 40% or higher. So our high school is nearing eligibility to participate, and G Blues is not eligible to participate at this point. But if we wanted to move forward, all our other schools would be eligible to participate. I know this is a pretty complex screen, so this is how we drive out the ISP number. So the first block is calculating the individual or the identified student percentage by building individually. So again, back to this program looks at the number of direct certifications per building, the number of homeless, migrant, foster, and if we ran our own Head Start, Shippensburg University is actually running Head Start, so we don't count those numbers in ours. So you come up with your number of identified students by building, and you compare that to your number of enrolled students in that building to come up with your identified student percentage. So that is line C. So in order to not generate a loss in this program, to receive 100% free reimbursement, you would want your ISP to calculate to 62.5%. So you can see none of our buildings meet that 62.5% ISP. So we're getting close. Some of our buildings, especially James Byrd at 54.4%, or district-wide, you can see district-wide, if we averaged all these together, it would be 47.11%. Again, you must be at 40% minimum to qualify. And so we show here that our high school actually does qualify, but the state did not show us qualifying at our high school level. And then from what you do is you take the ISP on line 6 and you times it by the free and reduced percentage multiplier of 1.6. It's just a factor that the state has come up with. And this becomes your reimbursement for free meals. So, and then the difference between 100% and line D is what you see on line E. And this would be the paid reimbursement percentage for students in that building. So I'm going to go over the calculation and explain it a little bit better. But what it does is, okay, let's just say, for example, James Byrd. We would want to apply for James Byrd to be in this program. Just to keep numbers simple, let's say 100%, we only have 100 students in that building. And all 100 students receive lunch that day. We would receive 87% of the free and reduced reimbursement rate. And then of those 100 kids, we would receive almost 13% of the paid reimbursement rate. This is how we're coming out financially, how we're calculating to see if this is financially viable. And I'll show this on the next page. But again, when I show this, because line C is not up to 62.5% in any of these buildings, we actually end up in a loss if we would enroll any of our buildings in this program. So I ran a couple scenarios just so we could see what the financial analysis looked like. So currently we operate under the National School Lunch Program, so that's the NSLP. And so under district-wide, less G Blues, because they don't qualify, based on, I took these numbers based on participation through April. And so through April, the National School Lunch Program generated revenue of about $1.18 million. Hypothetically, if we have been enrolled in the CEP program for this year, based on what I shared with you in the previous slide, at the free reimbursement rate being $4.55 and the paid reimbursement being 99 cents, based on the participation, we would generate just a little over $1 million in CEP. So we would still be at a loss, a revenue loss of about $161,000 district-wide, except G Blues, if we were to enroll the district in this program. So then, if we were to just look at intermediate school, James Byrd, Nancy Grace, and middle school, based on their individual ISP, we would be looking at a loss of about $83,000. If we would group, because you can group buildings together, if we were to group the intermediate school, James Byrd, Nancy Grace, and middle school together and use a group ISP, then the revenue loss would be about $75,000 to the district. And then if we leave out the middle school, because the middle school was still pretty low compared to the other elementary schools, based on a group ISP rate for intermediate school, James Byrd, Nancy Grayson, we would be at a loss of $43,201. If we would do it based on the individual ISP percentages for intermediate school, James Byrd, Nancy Grayson, we would be at a loss of $43,094. And if we would just enroll James Byrd, we would still be at a loss of $9,837. And when I show these losses, that's the minimum. Because if we were to enroll in this program, most likely it would increase the participation in that building. And so as participation increases, the revenue loss is going to increase because the number of paid students that would have paid and would have paid traditionally whatever the lunch rate is now, we're only now going to receive reimbursement of 99 cents. So it's going to magnify the loss. So at this point, administration cannot recommend even doing a single building at James Byrd because of the loss that it's going to generate for the district.
So that 99 cents, what meal does that cost? Is that like district cost or like wholesale versus like the retail?
So the 99 cents, that's the reimbursement that would come from the federal government. So when you enroll in the CEP program, it's going to take those percentages that I So the percentage is on here, on line D. What it's gonna do is it's gonna say, okay, if you had 100 students participate that day, it's gonna drive out the financial reimbursement. It's gonna take 100 students times 87% times $4.55. And then it's gonna take 100 students times 12.96% times 99 cents. Add the two together, and that's your reimbursement through the CEP program, which still comes up with a loss because your line C should be 62.5% in order to not come up to a revenue loss.
So, in other words, sorry, you
No,
have more
I think
questions.
that we're thinking the same thing. I mean, we know that you can't go to the store or feed yourself for 99 cents a meal. And it's like, you have to be at this 62.5 when we already have most of our district, well, the district total is over 50% poverty, not capturing all of the students. So again, it comes down to the unfair funding, that it's just very frustrating. But of course, I would love to see all of the kids have food because we know that nutrition is optimal for retaining and for learning. That's why PSSA weeks, our kids, there's lots of snacks and water because we want them to do well. But what about all of the other 179 days of the school year?
So there is some discussion at the state level and the federal level about the returning to what was happening during the pandemic, where all students were eligible. An extremely popular program that expired. I haven't had an update on where those discussions are. This is kind of like Plan B, and we're like Plan C. We're almost there, but not quite. And you know, it is, I think, frustrating to see it be right there, and know that we could help a lot of kids. So it's just an option, you know, that we wanted to put in front of the board to know that it exists, and that we're monitoring it, and that, you know, when those numbers shift, or if the board's will is to maybe look at some of this, or a building, you know, we can make or have those discussions. I struggle, you know, the James Byrd single building, you know, is certainly something that is, you know, not incredibly impactful, and it is better than nothing. You know, but I am thinking, you know, similar needs at Nancy Grayson and the intermediate building, and to do that for one section of the district, I struggled with some equity issues around that, even though I understand the argument to help who you can.
So another question that I had, so as far as the CEP eligibility, what are the families that have to do the paper copy? What are they not enrolled in or participating in that would kind of like ignite that that reporting?
So I don't have them all memorized, but I know SNAP is one of them. Like if you go through the state through SNAP benefits, you become directly certified for free meals. TANF is another program. Again, I can get back with the board. I don't have them all memorized. I know that's the two biggest ones, that if our families apply through the state for those programs, they're going to come through as free direct certs from the state.
So I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can help educate families that these services do exist, and that how it could actually help not just them, but the district as a whole, because nutrition is so important to
I
education.
can speak confidently that our social workers are in that business, along with our you know, our counselors are also in tune with being able to get resources too. And I think you hit upon one of the murky parts of this is, you know, like I said, we rely on that, our own kind of local information when it comes to free and reduced lunches that informs Title I and a, you know, a bunch of other things. You know, it also informs our PSSA and Keystone. So there's some murkiness there. You know, if we're so we have one-stop shopping for our own data needs. From what Christy said, my understanding is then we would have to rely on maybe like the SNAP data for our, like a bunch of different outside organizations would, you know, or programs. We would have to kind of get an amalgamation of who were enrolled in those programs to get our number.
Christy,
So what,
go ahead.
so what would happen if we were at the 62.5 and we did qualify? What would be that game plan, you know, as far as receiving data for that other funding?
So at that point, it might be worth it to be able to get all the kids free and, you know, breakfast and lunch for free. And again, I'm not familiar with any districts locally that are doing this.
Chambersburg.
Chambersburg is.
Been talking to Chambersburg.
We would figure it out in terms of getting that data. It would probably be just an order of magnitude more difficult to get.
It's just a different way of getting the data that's potentially a little bit more difficult,
I
and we don't own the data.
that's my understanding. Christy, is that yours?
Well, we still have the data. It's just, how do I say this? If we need to use like our old traditional free and reduced lunch information, from reading through the program, I'm understanding that you could still have families fill out the free and reduced lunch application. It would not be used to provide free or reduced lunches. It would be used for,
collect data.
yeah, and you have to disclose that to families, like, hey, we need you to fill this out so, you know, we can still do our waivers or
It would largely probably reduce the urgency to get that paperwork back to us, which is sometimes
Now
already a
that we
struggle.
know the numbers, we're gonna sit here and do nothing? I'm not comfortable with that.
Well, I mean, that's why we brought it forth to have board discussion on it. And, you know, obviously Christie has a number of different tiers that we could do. You know, so that's the purpose of bringing it forward, is to have that discussion, Mr. Suiters.
Sorry. Another way of sort of encapsulating all this would be that, and I know our budget's not great right now. But for $161-ish thousand, all the kids in the district could have free and reduced lunch. Is that,
that's the minimum. So it's probably gonna be more
Probably
than
gonna be
that
more,
because
because we lose
You're
some
gonna-
revenue.
you're gonna have more kids participate, which is gonna increase that revenue loss even greater than that.
So that's a floor number.
I want to say all the kids except for the students at Loras because they do not reach the level.
Right.
So in,
And possibly not the high school, because when we calculated this, we show the high school qualifying. The state did not show the high school qualifying. So I don't know if the state has the most up-to-date data when they ran that, but we ran this as of April, which is the requirement to calculate the ISP rate. So I don't know if the state had like earlier data. So maybe if we do this, the high school might not be able to qualify either.
So, Mr. Suiters, to your point, I think that the second phase of Mrs. Lent's presentation, where she talks more about the final budget numbers, can help also frame where we are and what individual board members might want to do with that.
Christy, what kind of balances are each of the schools carrying as far as like, you know, students that owe money? And what ends up happening, like if, let's say the high school, you know, kids owe, I don't know, let's just throw out a number, $5,000. What happens to that $5,000 at the end of the school year? Are we basically like wiping it clean? And so we're eating that loss?
So I don't have the numbers as of this year, and I hate to even quote what I think we're carrying on the books. I want to say 38,000, but I'm not sure. Please don't hold me to it. I can certainly get you those numbers. But so what we do is if students have a lunch debt, we will try to collect as best we can that debt. But if they don't pay, the district carries it on its books until it wipes it clean.
And what's the time frame around that? The reason I'm asking is, you know, let's say the district right now shows $30,000, you know, in unpaid lunches, and we're talking about only a loss of 43,000. Like, you know what I mean? There's some like offset in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you bring up a really valid point. I mean, there is already some cost to the district for those unpaid lunch bills as they stand.
But 30,000 isn't year over year.
Okay.
30,000 has accumulated over many years. So we haven't wiped it clean. At some point, if it gets too high, we're probably gonna come that as a recommendation to say, you know, we don't feel like we can collect this anymore. We need to wipe it off the books. But right now, we're just carrying that debt.
Is there a way for you though to look to see like this school year that's ending, what that balance was? So we would have an idea as a board, like what that financial, that loss would be?
Yes.
Okay.
But as a practical matter, I mean, just related to that question, like every kid who wants lunch gets lunch.
Correct. So it is to your point and Becky's point. The state legislature has passed numerous laws or edicts to schools saying that we can't refuse lunch to any student. So the students who to your point, you're correct. Any student that wants a lunch is able to eat.
So it sounds. I mean, I'm looking at this kind of bottom line on page 13. It's like the next slide, Chrissy, you mind over there? And it looks like $43,000, would sort of cover food expenses at all of our elementary schools, except for G Blues. And that seems like a worthy investment, but then on the other hand, like, it's not that kids aren't going without food, right? Because we don't refuse food to anybody, and so if they want lunch, they get lunch.
Correct.
So practically, there's not a big difference. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. I'm not trying to argue one way or the other. I'm just trying to, as a practical matter, I'm not sure that like kids or families would tell that much difference, except for those kids who don't qualify and are conscientious about paying their bills. Like they would then not have this bill to pay if we decided to pay the $43,000.
Correct. That would be the upside for families. Would be that savings.
They would never have that debt facing, in the future debt would never be able to.
Potential debt, or not do something else in order to not be in debt at school.
And again, that is the minimum loss. It's going to be greater than that because our participation is going to increase. So I can't tell you what it's going to be until we would operate the program. So just to let you know that you can apply for this annually. It has to be done by June 30th of each year. We don't know what the number, I mean, I can kind of monitor the numbers, but the official numbers are our April numbers. So next April, certainly can look at this again, and see if we want to apply. I believe from my understanding of the program that if we would get in this program and it wouldn't be financially viable, I don't believe we're stuck in it for several years. I think you can move in and out. But I mean, do we really want to do that? Because I think that could be difficult on our families. Like, oh wait, this year I received it for free, but this year I didn't. And I just think it's going to be a lot to jump in and out of the program. But I just want to let you know, if we do get in it and it's like, whoa, like we faced a substantial loss and we need to get out of it, we can do that, my understanding.
So for the board's perspective, we wanted to put this in front of you as information that it exists and that we're close to being more viable than not, and that we'll continue to monitor the numbers and pulling out the different tiers. If there is a desire to do that for a building or subset of buildings, that possibility exists, but it would be obviously at this stage of where our numbers are, would be an additional hit to the budget.
So what my vision is, if we can get the communication out and try to get our direct cert numbers up, so then maybe next year it's more financially viable at this time.
I think it's a good idea to just let the community know this, and I think we should get our social workers on this. I'm sure they're already doing it. I'm sure there are community members that are already doing this, but I mean, it's a big jump though from like 52 or 54, wherever we are, up to the 65, right?
Well, the 62.5% is truly, you're going to be 100% viable. So I didn't run these. If we, just say we were at 59% instead of, let me see, what's James Bird? So James Bird is currently 54.4% and we're at a 10,000 loss. So like if James Bird went up to like 59, we probably wouldn't be at a loss. You definitely won't be at a loss if it's at 62.5% because you're 100% reimbursement. So there's gonna be somewhere below 62.5% where it's probably fiscally viable. It's
And
just
looking
not
at the
right.
numbers tracking from over the last 7 years to now, you know, we're tracking in that direction in all of our buildings.
So,
Sorry. This is like we've been stuck on this for a while where we see that. I mean, the trend's better, at least we're getting more. It's probably because of the direct thing. We have more students as a percentage of the middle school than we used to, but it still drops off at the high school. So this is a fairly entrenched problem. But I would love to see us try to, I mean, it's all good news for the families. If we get you signed up for the benefits you need from SNAP or TANF or WIC or whatever, you're also going to get free and reduced lunch. So all the services kind of come as a package deal. And that, I don't see a downside for that. Maybe there are some families who see that as a downside, but if we can get, if we can really get the word out and have our social workers make sure they know how to
Apply through
get
the
these
state. Yeah.
social workers, counselors, teachers, everybody to say, hey, if your family's struggling, sign up for these services and get the benefits.
yeah, I hate to stick on the reporting bit, but I wonder, because here in getting people to sign up for free and reduced lunch, you're offering a concrete incentive for them to do so. And then there's this side benefit that Dr. Lyman mentioned that in the process, they may find that they qualify for other programs, other government programs that help their families. But I'm worried, and help me out if this is a legitimate worry or not, but if our data collection goes down, right, if we're sort of not able to record as many people as qualifying or students qualifying for free and reduced lunch, then that affects revenue in other places, right? Because we have other revenue sources that are tied to those numbers, and if those numbers go down, like kind of artificially, like our needs haven't gone down, but the reporting of those needs has gone down, and then that creates problems in getting funding from other sources. Is that correct?
A possibility exists, when you don't have that direct free and reduced housed in the district. That mechanism, like I said, is the cleanest way for us to report out to PIMS and Title I and E-rate and all the things that are connected to that number.
I mean, it's a kind of bureaucratic irrationality, but you still, the game is what it is, and you have to play it. So, I don't know.
So based on, again, the losses and trying to find out some more information, it would be nice if we would have time to delve more into this to know what it would look like, if we would apply for it in future years for like, what's it mean for Title I? What's it mean for E-rate? I tried to get some of that information, but was running out of time.
Yeah, I do know that when I fill out the federal programs grants for Title I, II, and IV, there's a CEP provision there that I could fill out for determining the poverty rate of schools, but I don't quite know exactly because we haven't qualified for it. So I don't quite know exactly what it would do to the distribution of funds.
So then it sounds like it's possible that it's just something we haven't done before. It may not be worse or more burdensome. It's just we've never done it before.
Right. So there's a little bit of the unknown.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions before we kind of switch gears? Thank you all.
All right, so moving on to budget. Since the last meeting, we did make an update to our personnel request. So as you can see here, I put a line in that says newly added as of this Budget and Finance Committee meeting. So everything up above has remained the same and was in the proposed final budget. So our STAR teacher at the middle school and a registered behavior technician full-time, our ESL teacher, a first and second grade teacher, one at Nancy Grace and one at James Byrd, our registrar receptionist part-time, splitting that from the business office assistant, hiring, I think we're calling it a transportation secretary now, but for the purpose of bringing routing back in-house, an in-school suspension supervisor at the high school, our executive session item that we discussed about, a full-time custodian, the bocce ball coach and assistant coach, and then our newly added items for this meeting is an assistant middle school cross-country coach at a cost of $2,305, and then additional athletic trainer part-time at an estimated cost of $11,000. And so for the upcoming school year, we would recommend that that be paid for out of athletic fund balance for 23-24. And then if this is needed, hopefully in future years, we can start to absorb that into the general fund budget, because being that this would be a recurring expense, we wouldn't want that to be taken out and deplete the athletic fund balance. So that brings our must-have personnel list to $839,736. So putting that into our revised budget summary, so starting with our revenue line items, we have not changed this since the last budget and finance meeting. So our revenues as of June 5th, projecting increasing taxes to the index, brings in about $65.4 million. And then our expenditures as of May 1st, excluding the personnel request because we updated that, was 65.9 million, looking at the must-have column. And then, so we revised that to 839,736. We have the Memorial Park agreement. The rental amount for the Memorial Park has increased, as well as the district is now responsible for the custodial and cleaning cost. So that's an additional $12,589 to the budget. We are negotiating with our transportation provider a change to the contract. So based on that, we're estimating an increase to our transportation budget of $238,876. On the last agenda, as a discussion item, was adjusting the pay level for our maintenance and transportation secretaries. That's on the June 12th agenda for approval. That would add additional $1,066 to the budget. And then Mrs. Woodall had given a federal programs update at the last board meeting. And so based on this, she would need to add $50,000 to her curriculum budget to cover staff development, since that would no longer be funded out of our federal programs. So that brings our new expenditure total to $67.1 million, brings our surplus/deficit, which would be a deficit, to $1.68 million. We would use $400,000 out of fund balance for our 7th grade teachers, bringing our revised deficit to $1.28 million. And again, we would use our general fund balance to cover this deficit.
I have a question. On the other page on personnel requests, lot number 6. We asking to get approved, or it was approved, that position?
So that's in the budget. If it's approved through the budget, we would then write a job description and bring that for the board. Mr. Scott needs to be in the budget first. Our plan would be to have that in place for the opening of school.
I have an issue with that position.
What are your concerns?
From my understanding from last discussion, this individual is supposed to stay at and watch students that are on suspension within the school, correct?
So currently, most schools, particularly high schools, have several levels of disciplinary consequences. We have detention, Saturday detention, but because we do not currently have an in-school suspension program, our next level is out-of-school suspension. So we can either punish or discipline students with detention or out-of-school suspension. So that's a wide swing, and very difficult to manage, particularly when some students have IEPs, and therefore they have limits on the number of days they can be suspended outside of school in a school year. So what happens is those students, or all students, rack up lots of days of out-of-school suspension. In-school suspension allows students to, still have to come to school, which in and of itself, when compared to being suspended and sleeping in at home, potentially can be more of a disciplinary situation, and it also keeps them connected to school in that we can monitor their academic progress. We can make sure that they're doing work. In-school suspension is common in almost every single school in the state. We have it at our middle school. We don't have it at our high school. So that's one of those things that doesn't really make sense. You know, where one of our buildings has all the options available to administration and you know, a school, and our high school has this big hole. You know, where we don't have this option for kids. Suspension days, because we can provide education, don't necessarily count against the special ed number. And what happens is a lot of times, if we use too many days on a student, particularly a student with an IEP, if we hit that magic number of 15 for the school year, we're still responsible to educate them, but we often have to remove them to an outside placement that can cost, I think the ones I saw were like $73,000 a year. You know, so there is some inherent hidden cost savings there, Mr. Scott, because now we can assign in-school suspension, which would be more appropriate than an out-of-school for some of the infractions, and we don't build that number, or it's a slower number to get with our special needs students, where we would have to place them somewhere else at a very high daily rate or yearly rate.
How many?
Also, we only have a few number of slots that we pay for at those facilities. And if we use them all, so worst case scenario, Mr. Scott, we use all of our slots. So a student hits their limit, we need an alternate placement for it, and we don't have a place to put them. So that also becomes problematic. So what we're really doing is just bringing the high school up to what I would consider normal functioning for a high school, and making it commiserate to our middle school program, you know, in one swoop with this position.
What are we doing with the high school now?
Within discipline.
What are we doing now in the high school?
So the options that so if a student does something, realistically, the administration has two disciplines that they can give them. They can give them three: a warning, they can give them a detention for an hour or two, or they can kick them out of school.
Okay.
So there's a lot of infractions that are not worthy of being kicked out of school, but are more severe than just an hour of detention or two. And if I choose to skip that hour of detention, then we're throwing a student, you know, the next level would be to suspend them out of school, because this crucial piece of the disciplinary program doesn't exist.
But if the student has had detention, he has to get detention more than once, right? To get the suspension.
Well, it depends. Sometimes,
the gravity of the situation.
right? I mean, it depends. You know, if it's frequent, like we would be progressive in our discipline, which means if you keep doing the same thing, we're going to give you detention, maybe another detention. If detention's not working with you, normally we would, in most schools, you'd move to an in-school suspension before you remove the student from the school. You know, our goal should be to be keeping kids in school. You know, because that's where we have the structure. That's when we can you know, meet their needs. That's where we can keep them on track, and show that we have a relationship with them. So this position is key to that. Working with those kids, getting them back on track, having them reflect on what they did, how not to do it again. You know, we can really even start to have some talks about restorative practices. You know, all good things that most high schools just take for granted, Mr. Scott. I mean, this was one of the big surprises when I got here, where like my jaw kind of dropped when I found out that we didn't have this basic part of a disciplinary program in our school.
For me, it's got detention. You say he has to be detention more than one time, and then we got to bring him back to in-school suspension now. That's what you want. So it'll be an in-school
So
suspension.
Fred, let me just give you a scenario here. So we know that
heard-
vaping is a big concern. So let's just say that you get caught vaping in the bathroom, and now you get out of school suspension.
Okay.
You're going to go home and you're going to go vape all day because now you don't have to go to school. Versus if we had in-school suspension, Nothing says I don't want to do this again, like sitting in 3 days of ISS, doing my schoolwork, looking at four walls without my cell phone, without my peers. So every other school, even the elementary schools, in-school suspension, if need be, is there, except the high school. So there is no consistency or continuum of discipline. It's either lunch detention, before or after school detention, or you're suspended with no supervision, which these kids, we know, need adult supervision.
But isn't that the parents' responsibility? Why, all I hear is about including the parents, including the parents. Now we have,
Correct, but during the day, most parents are working, so if these kids are suspended from school for an infraction where they need to have adult supervision, the parents have to work. You just heard about the 52% poverty rate. Like, these parents are working.
that's been going on for a lifetime. People have been working. My contention is, why should I have a babysitter for a child that the parents should be instructing to do the right thing? So we put them in school suspension. The parents don't have to be involved at all.
So I would argue that they're
notified, but
they are children, and so they get to make mistakes, and that's part of being a child. And our adult, our role is to correct them. And in school suspension, to Mrs. Eberly's point, is another tool that we have to use, and it allows us to have supervision over them and put them in a spot that is not comfortable. In terms of the socialization, a lot of kids come to school to socialize with their friends, and the punishment now fits the crime, so to speak. So we're not throwing students out of school for things that in another school they would be put in school suspension for.
I'm not on a school board at other schools. I'm on a school board at Shippensburg, and for me, you get a child doesn't get suspended right away. He goes through detention. What point does there consequences? I'm not missing the consequence. He goes to detention.
Parents are notified when they do get detention.
Okay, and
so here's the thing. So
they shouldn't
I
get a
really don't
suspension.
know of any other school. Shippensburg used to have in-school suspension for years. I mean, hate to admit it, but I was in it. They had it for years, and at some point, due to staffing, they kind of dropped it. So when we want to talk about, to make these kids not do it again, you have to kind of meet them where they're at to give them a punishment that suits the violation for them to know, kind of a learned behavior, I'm not doing that again.
But if the parents doesn't enforce that, the kids could put in suspension, and then the day's over.
Well, that goes beyond just discipline. That also goes to education. That goes to lunches. It's not just regarding discipline with the family input or parents parenting. It's far beyond that. But we can only do what we can do.
That's what I'm saying.
In-school suspension, to me, in my opinion, is a necessity for a continuum. If they would have done something in elementary school or at the middle school, that would be the punishment. And a lot of times that behavior changes because it's learned and I'm not going to do this. So why would they do something for 15, 14 years of their life and then come to a building and then they do something and it's you punish them, but it's not an applicable punishment for what they've done.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
What is the likelihood that the funds spent for this position would save us more than what we're spending on the position?
So I would say that just one student who has hit that, one special needs student who has met the 15-day limit on out-of-school suspension, we would actually, it would be
You would exceed it.
$73,000 is a spot that we prepay for.
So by spending the money on this one position, we're potentially saving more money than the position costs.
So not to predict the future.
How are you saving that much?
So
Against it, but I just don't.
absolutely. So, Mr. Shooters, when we get to that limit, okay, so, and we have with several students, okay, so that student at the end of that 15 days, we still have to educate them, which means we purchase this slot at $73,000.
I understand that.
So once they get to that 15 days, we don't have a choice. We have to continue to educate them either in the building or in this other place. So with that being said, if we're not assigning them out of school suspension, the out of school suspension days, because we're able to provide instruction and meet their IEP needs, they don't count towards that 15-day total. So we're able to keep them here and be more judicious in how we use our out of school suspensions so that we're not getting to that 15 day limit where we then have to find a placement for them.
I think you're still gonna have that student.
I agree. Right. And what I'm not here saying solid numbers, but what I'm saying is right now we don't even have the choice. Right now when something big comes up or bigger or medium, they're going out of school suspension.
How many kids are special? You said special needs. How many?
We have 20% of our student population has an IEP.
All right, how many of that is in suspension that would fit the suspension category?
So I don't have the numbers in front of me.
But I mean, if it's mostly special needs, I'll go along with that. That's a different ball game.
Right. To be clear, our in-school suspension plan is not just for special needs students.
understand.
It is for all students.
I understand
who may
that.
have
but
that infraction.
You say special needs consistently. I want to know, is that special needs the biggest priority?
Because of the 15 days.
It's really a function of that. Once we hit the 15 days of out of school suspension, which we do in our current system quickly because we don't have any other options beyond a detention, which is not motivating for some of our students. And the out of school suspension for some of those students may be rewarding in some way because they don't want to come to school necessarily. So you really kind of get a chicken and the egg thing here. In school suspension makes sure that student, whether they're special needs or not, is in school doing their schoolwork. They're just doing it in a setting that is less than appealing to them. And remember, the goal of discipline is to change behavior. And if we don't have if we don't have this option, we have one less tool to change students' behavior in order to get them on track and back into class and on their way.
This person, this ISS person, they'll be specialized in the teaching every class.
So what happens is teachers will send their assignments to the student, most likely in Google Classroom. They'll work through their assignments. The instructions were there. They'll be able to email their teacher. If they need help in the moment, this person can do their best to kind of help them or at least maybe contact the teacher. It's way better than them sitting in a room trying to figure out something on their own. Some of the kids may struggle with literacy. This person can help read the instructions, it's really about in the best case scenario, Mr. Scott. And I have experience with this. This is a person who is the kids respect and is on their side, and they're willing to abide by the rules and get some work done. And this person kind of simultaneously encourages them, but also holds them accountable. In that setting, I think Mr. Kressler may have some experience, with that kind of person who's able to do both of those things.
So, real quick, I know the answer to this, but I guess it's just reassurance for anybody who's listening who doesn't know this. We don't really have the ability to just have random educators throughout the building cover this. We're stretched thin. So this is
correct, and also we have contractual planning time. That would make it really difficult. Consistency, to your point, the other side of that is consistency is a key in this setting. In scenarios where you're bringing in, potentially 8 different teachers, that can get messy. One person who's consistent, who knows the student or comes to know the student and is a consistent presence is the best, or at least model that I've seen.
So my next question then is, in the event, hopefully we never have kids that are sitting in that room, but it happens. But in the event there is nobody assigned to ISS, like in your past experience, like what would be the plan for that person other than?
So we would just pull them like we would have, we can always plug them in somewhere else.
Yep.
The beginning of the year, there's a couple days usually that we haven't populated it yet. And we can certainly move that person to make sure that they're viable and productive on those days. It's also good, just this is an upside, on days when we do testing, we can close ISS and then pull that person to kind of assist in other things. So we would not often, but sometimes do that if there was like a big day where we needed all hands on deck. We would just not schedule anyone for that day.
How many kids would potentially be in this room? 1, 2, 6, 12, 15?
So we would have to look at the look at the configuration of the space. We don't want it to get too big, Mr. Bard. I would say probably 6 is probably the magic number there. Because then it just becomes a management issue, and kids can feed off each other. So it also comes down to the scheduling, like we would schedule people out as well. The other advantage is, like say there's an altercation between kids, you can put a student in, one of the students in for 2 days and then the other student into 2 days after that, and you get 4 days of separation, which can help cool off situations. I've used that strategy a number of times as well.
So I just want to point out that, this discussion has been helpful, and hopefully we understand in-school suspension a little bit better. But by approving the budget, you are not approving this position.
Oh, we're not?
No.
Oh, okay.
We are only approving money set aside in the budget for this position. The position will come up for vote later.
Because
We would have to write a job description and get it.
so the budget
Right.
dictate the position.
Say again,
The
sir?
money's there for the position.
Correct.
Exactly.
All right, so-
But if the position was not approved, then the money would just get pushed back
Reallocated.
into,
I understand.
general fund or whatever.
How many kids do we have that go to this alternative $73,000 teaching or on an average?
So it often rotates in and out, Mr. Noggle. So we pre-purchase a number of slots at different facilities. Okay,
How much do
different.
we pay for the pre-purchase?
Well, it depends on the facility. They're around. They're not cheap.
I'm sure.
I would say the number that I saw in the special ed budget was $73,000 per slot. That's why you may notice the special education budget was pretty high.
So we pay for that regardless if we send the child there or not?
We do. So we're careful to make sure that we're not overspending those.
So by doing this, we technically wouldn't have to pre-purchase as many?
Correct. And that would be, and I don't want to make promises.
No, that's fine.
That could be a potential. If we see that we don't need to send those kids or we've not significantly used those spots, we have to pre-purchase them because if we don't, someone else is going to. That's never been a problem that I've seen. We've never not had kids, if we have 7 slots somewhere, I would say there's always 5 or 6 kids who are coming or going into the programs. Those placements are not always meant to be year-long placements. Sometimes it can be 45 days if there's been a policy violation. So we need those slots for those kinds of policy violations.
So technically, couldn't we say that we will not pre-purchase one of those?
So
That out of our budget?
that is a potential. We would want to see what the numbers look like at the end of the year and how many of those slots it's never an exact science. I can't sit here and say, we used all 7 slots at a place all year long. But we get pretty close.
But if we give you that space, should be able to save.
Potentially, if once we have this in place, we'll be able to know what those numbers look like and whether or not we're able to reduce that for the following budget.
That's fine. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Christy, did we make it all the way through your presentation?
I don't think so. Okay, I think we were done with this slide. So, again, just to revisit this, so we're at a $1.68 million deficit, $400,000 out of fund balance for our 7th grade teaching positions, and then $1.28 million out of just the general fund balance. So I know you might be like, ooh, that might be a high deficit, but I just wanted to remind those that have been on the board that for the current budget year, 22-23, that we're sitting in now, the board had approved a budget. Did I just?
No, you're
Okay.
good.
Okay, had approved a budget to use just over $1.6 million in fund balance. So we're right almost where we were last year at the same time. Keep in mind for 23-24, we have not fully borrowed all of the money that we have set aside for our annual debt service payments. Some of our revenues continue to come in higher than anticipated. So I foresee ending the year in a better situation than what we had technically budgeted. Just for an example, our earned income tax revenue for 22-23, we budgeted 5.5 million. Estimating, again, we have one more month to go. I'm estimating on the low end, getting in $6 million, but I think it's going to be more like 6.1, 6.2 million. So seeing that increase, I did add some of that into the 23-24 budget, but I only added in 6 million. So as we continue to see growth, I think our earned income tax is going to continue to grow as well. And then just remember the 23-24 budget includes 60% of the governor's budget. So if we would get 100%, that wouldn't be an additional 608,827. That would reduce that 1.2 million in half, so about 600,000. And like I said, some of the revenues anticipated for 23-24, such as EIT, I think are somewhat conservative yet. So I believe there's some money in there that would help cover that deficit. And then just a reminder, our estimated fund balance as of 6/30 is at 9.9 million. When we take out, we purchased the Burkholder building. We have the next gen building automation system coming out. And then that is prior to the closeout of the 22-23 fiscal year, so I believe we'll be adding money back into the fund balance. So then, what does that mean to our taxpayers? I've showed this slide before. I've actually added a couple different scenarios to this slide. So increasing taxes to the index brings in about 1.5 million. So just looking at the average or the median assessed value in both counties, we kind of just focused on that, so I only put the median assessed value in for this purpose. For our Cumberland County residents, it's about $147 increase to their tax bill, and for our Franklin County residents on the median assessed value, it's about a $50 annual increase to their tax bill. If the board should choose not to go to the index, I gave some scenarios. If you would go to 91% of the index or a 4.9% increase, that would generate about 1.34 million. It would be a revenue loss of about 187,000. And then you can see there for Cumberland County residents, it would be about $133,000 increase on the median assessed value and $38 to our Franklin County taxpayers on the median assessed value. If you would go to 75% of the index or 4.1%, we would generate about 1.1 million. That would be a $384,000 loss compared to going to the index. Our median assessed value Cumberland County residents would pay $57 more in their tax bill. Franklin County residents would then start to see their tax bill go down by about $25 to the median residents. And then I didn't continue out that calculation because it's, just only going to magnify, especially for the Franklin County side, their tax bill would go down. But if we would only go to 50% of the index or 2.7% increase, we're going to lose about 778,000. If we'd only go to a quarter of the index, we're going to lose about 1.6 million. So just wanted to share that. But again, the recommendation from the administration is to increase taxes to the index. So that brings us to our closing remarks. In order to have our tax bills out and start receiving in revenue by July 1, we would need the board to approve the final budget no later than June 12th, this upcoming board meeting. Is there any questions, feedback regarding the administration's proposal to increase taxes to the index and then to include all the personnel items as well as everything else presented in previous Budget and Finance Committee meetings?
Yeah, since we're not feeding the children, we should let them get fed at home and maybe cut the percentage down.
Any other comments?
Yeah, so I guess I've said this like 3 times through the course of my time on the board, but I think maybe one thing that we should remember is that we really want our state legislature to adjust and make changes to the cyber charter stuff, because I don't know, I didn't see it, and maybe it's in there, but we pay a lot of money for that when kids don't even actually get an education from us. So I think that's hopefully something that we could get some changes at the state level that would help us out a bunch. Plus, selfishly, I just wish the kids would come to school in person here because I think we offer a lot of great things and our vision is great with Take Shape. I almost forgot it. Thanks. And I just think we have a lot of things to be happy about to celebrate as we move forward. So,
Did you say feed the kids before they came to school?
We're not doing anything for the program there, that Chris went.
But we don't know if the free breakfast will still continue for next year, or do we know?
So currently, students are getting free breakfast. They just haven't tipped over to the.
Good, because
yeah.
we're at 50% poverty in this community.
Yeah.
And they're the taxpayers.
But I feel like the people that we should be frustrated with is the government who makes these rules that we have to follow. It is
I agree
not
100%, but I
equitable.
don't sit on that board.
We need to take our frustrations to
I gotta
legislator. Like,
listen
that's not
to
our role. It's
what-
frustrating, but
But again, nobody's going home hungry, Charlie. They get lunch every day,
And
whether they can pay for
No,
it or not
but
pay for
it
it.
might be the 90-year-old lady that's in her house might be going hungry because we raised the taxes. That never goes away. That compounds every year. And this is the largest tax increase that Shippensburg ever did that I can remember.
and again, it comes to if you're a 90-year-old lady living in Franklin County, it's not going to be that much of an impact. It comes down to legislator and asking them to make it right. I mean, it sucks to be us to make that decision. Like, it's a huge weight to carry, but at the end of the day, we have to be frustrated with those who are creating the inequity from Franklin and Cumberland
I live
County.
in Cumberland County. I'm gonna pay more no matter what,
Me too.
so.
any other comments?
Just wanted to add to Levi's, I was going through the previous budget presentations. We're estimating cyber charter school next year at 2.7 million. So definitely, if you have the chance to talk to your legislature, we need reform in terms of cyber charter school. And we definitely need reform for our multi-county school districts and the equalization, because we are harmed in that calculation. And of course, some of our residents bear the burden of the tax increase. So if that could be changed, then it would be equal. It wouldn't be one county taking on the burden over the other county.
And the cyber charter thing is only going to get worse. I have some information to share at the next school board meeting. It's pretty eye-opening, what else they're kind of getting ready to put their hands into.
And I would just reiterate, nothing is more surreal than, going to 75% of the index and having folks' taxes go down in one county. I mean, I think something's broken when that's the case.
All righty, well, we are going to adjourn this meeting. Just for informational purposes, we're heading to executive session to discuss some personnel issues. And I imagine that will be announced again before the regular board meeting, or at the regular board meeting that we had an executive session. All right, thank you.